Well, I'm going to try to make this as quick as I can because this is supposed to be a short demo. I ran into a lady at a store and she said, "Hey, do you make any stools?" And I said, "I've never made a stool, but I could." So I made a stool. Which is a little three-legged stool, and I was pretty proud of it, and I gave it to my 4-year-old granddaughter, and she liked it. And then my 10-year-old granddaughter decided to jump off a trampoline and land on the edge of it, and it turned out my design was not as good as I thought. So since then, I've made like 25 stools, and there's nothing special about the one I make. But I have learned some things to do and not do that I'm hoping to pass on to you. So I'm not going to do that much turning today. It's just I'm going to show you some of the mistakes I've made and what not to do so you don't make those mistakes. So I made 25 of those for somebody, and they seem to be selling. They're pretty happy with them. So a lot of you probably have never turned a stool, but at least some kids like them. They also use them for plant stands, that sort of thing. So I start with a 10.5 inch or 10.25 inch blank, and I'm hoping this will fit on this chuck. And to save some time here, I already put a mortise in here with a little bit of a dovetail. The way I do it, I'm never going to be able to sand or put a finish on this after I start turning and flip it over. So I've already put a carnauba wax finish on this. And one of the key things is you want to mark where the center is, and I'll explain why in a minute, but you need to know exactly where the center of this is because later on you're going to use that mark. So the next thing I have to do is I want to put a 15-degree angle on the outside here so that the legs will spread out, okay? So I have a little angle finder here that's set at 15, and what I'm going to try to do is make this so that it's at 15 degrees. But I'm not really used to this lathe, so we'll see what happens. Don't ever do that when it's running. So I don't know if you can see that from the top, but it's not 15 degrees yet. Can you see that? And I need to go in there a little further. slow down. So that's pretty close. So for demo purposes, we'll say that's good enough. Now later on, we're going to refine this a little bit. The only purpose of, and I'm not sanding or anything yet, the only purpose of getting the angle on now is that when I drill the holes, I want it to be perpendicular on my drill press. Okay? By the way, ask any questions, because... Okay, so that is hard maple. So at this point, I need to, let's see, according to my notes. Okay. Now, I did it this way only because the wood was a certain thickness, but I could have done it with a glue up and a blank, and then I wouldn't have to take it down to the where I don't have any drill holes anymore, but that's not the way I did it. How do I get this? Is this locked here? Okay. This is a Nova, not the heavy duty one. So I didn't, it was what I bought. Okay, so now what I need to do, I have a big hole in this one, so it might not work out, but we'll see. I'm gonna get rid of these screw holes, go down to about 1.5 inches here, and then we'll move on. I gotta go a little bit deeper. I had a broken screw in there, so maybe we'll still have some indents in it, but let's see where we're at. I'm gonna go just a little bit further. Close enough for what we're doing next. So next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that this is flat, which is pretty good. Okay. So normally we don't need to sand it now. We can sand it later. So you don't want to watch me sand. Let me check my notes here. Flatten top. Okay, so all you guys know who Richard Raffin is? He's a really famous turner. He says that you need to put a little indent on the outside here so that people who put their coffee cup on it will know where the edge is, to not put their coffee cup on the very edge and have it tip off. So since he says it, I do it. I'm just going to round this corner off a little bit. Okay, so let's assume that that's all sanded and really nice and ready to go. The next thing I want to do is mark where my holes are going to be. So if I look at this flattened area here, which is about 2.5 inches, can you see this okay, what I'm measuring? Okay, so middle of 2.5 is 1.25, so I'm going to want it right about there would be my center. So this is why this mark is important, because you want to mark a circle now from where your mark was. And this is what I'm hoping to pass on to you guys. There's a bunch of techniques. That's not quite right. Okay, so now I need, so let's suppose I'm going to put the first hole right there. Okay, I gotta take my glasses off for this. So this is going to be set to the diameter, to my first, what? Radius, I'm sorry, you're right. Okay, so if I have everything measured correctly and I have this thing set correctly, if I do 1, 2, I want to put a mark there. I don't know, can you see this, what I'm doing? 1, 2, 1, 2. Perfect. Okay. So I want to make another punch mark right there, and another one. Did I just do that one? Where'd the other? Right. Whew, that one is hard to see. I'm going to check that before I put a dent in there and find out it's not where it should be. Yeah, that mark is not very good, but okay. Okay, so now I bring it to my drill press, and I want to drill holes in there. Right. So what I do is I have a little table. okay, that's set at 15 degrees. So if I put this on my drill press, and I've done everything right, and I line up my mark like that, I should be able to drill a hole, and it's perpendicular to this surface, okay? And I'll make it so the legs splay out. So table like this, really, I was trying to do it with a hand drill and other things, and it just didn't work out. So anyway, this has worked out really well for me. Any questions on any of that so far? Okay, so through the miracle of TV, I have one that's already drilled. Okay, so okay, at that point, this one is obviously, I've sanded this a little better. Well, that's why you have to do, that's a good question. That's why you have to do the, I'm sorry, how deep are the holes? Well, that's why you have to do the top and trim it off before you drill the holes. Because when you put it on the table, you make sure your Forstner bit comes down to about 1/4 inch of the table. And that way they'll be as deep as, they'll be the right depth. So depending on how thick it is, the holes may or may be slightly less depth. So you want to do this side first so that you get this diameter right here. That's probably 1/4 inch. Okay? So at this point, I'm going to put it back on the lathe. That's the wrong chuck key. For one thing, I got all these pencil marks to sand off. But I think I have, I don't have. Okay. Okay. Well, I'll just tell you what I would do. This is what the legs are going to start out as, and when you turn them down to the same diameter as this hole, what you want to do is take one that's got too short, just a sample, and stick it in the hole, and you might find that there's a slight gap on one side of the hole, and that's because this angle didn't match up with the table perfectly. So one is 14.5 degrees and one is 15.5 degrees, so you'll have just a little gap where the shoulder comes up against the edge of the hole. So you can adjust this angle now a little bit to get it so that the leg will fit in there perfectly. Okay? Is there any questions on that? Okay. Yeah. George. That's a good idea. George is pointing out that if you were to build a slightly deeper, a wider diameter hole that's the size of the outside of this into your hole, just a little bit, then when it squeezes in there, it'll come up flush. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Okay, that's a good idea. I'd never tried that. Okay? So at this point, I've got this angle modified so the legs are going to go in there. How am I doing on time? Oh, okay, lots of time. Okay, so at that point, after I've adjusted this angle and I've sanded it, I put a finish on the, I use carnauba wax on them, and then this part is done. You can pass it around if you want. I do. Okay. So next part is I have to turn 3 legs. So That's okay. My shop is so messy. Don't worry. Don't worry about it. So I have these marked already, and I rounded it off to save a little time. But if you don't know how to round off a piece of wood like that, talk to me later. Don't do that. So these legs are 13 inches. I have made some that were a little bit longer than that, or a little shorter than that, for a little, like a 10-inch stool. This is a 12-inch stool. So you can make the legs as fancy as you want. You can put, some stools have stretchers on them between the legs. They can put coves and beads and all that kind of stuff on the legs. The lady that I was dealing with wanted, simplistic, so that's what I did. What? No, no. If you get them a little longer than the one I've made, you might want to have to put stretchers between the legs. And there's a whole science to doing stretchers too, because you want to maybe drill them all the way through and put wedges in them, so they're not just in tension, they're in compression too. So, okay, so let me see where I'm at here. This is a badan, if you don't know what it. I want the foot to be smaller than the top, so I'm just gonna. Okay. And I do like 30 of these legs at a time, so I want to put a mark about here and here. Now I make this step a little longer than the hole, and then I try it, and if there's a uniform gap all the way around, then I just move it over to my bandsaw and take a little sliver off the end of it until it sets up nice up against the edge. But for purposes today, that's fine. I've also found it helps. Let's suppose this fits. I'd usually test them and make sure they fit, and I might have to take just a skosh off, but we'll assume it fits those holes I drilled. I also clean up this edge here, make it slightly concave so that the outside of the step will be touching the bottom side of the stool as opposed to the inside. Okay? And then as far as the bevel or the taper on this, now that I know where halfway is, I just kind of and then I sand it and put carnauba wax on it, and that one's ready to go. Okay, so the legs really, you can really fly through them. I bought a whole lathe with a duplicator on it so that I could make these things, and turns out it's quicker on my lathe to do it than using that. Okay, so at that point, you got 3 legs, you got that stool with a hole in it. Where'd the finished stool go? I need that back. Thank you, sir. So, then you glue it, you put a weight on it, etc. You make sure that, you know, these are as good as possible. The last thing I want to talk about is the problem is, if you look at how that sits right now, none of the legs are actually sitting flat on the surface. And so I tried cutting, marking them with a pencil around each one when it was level, and then cutting it with a saw. Didn't quite be level, and then I'd sand another one, and then the other leg, and then the other leg, and meanwhile my legs are getting shorter as I keep sanding, trying to get them to everything, and then my thing would tilt. And anyway, I'm sure there are people like George that have a better technique, but the fixture I came up with, let me see if I can put it out here. So what I do, I'm going to need that in a second, but okay. This fits on my, either on my belt sander or on my bandsaw. And this thing sits 90 degrees to that. And then I put this on here and clamp. You want to hold that a second? Yeah. So at this point, I can run it through my sander and make sure that they're all sanded smoothly, or actually, I have a bandsaw with quite a bit of height to it, and I can actually run it right through my bandsaw. And because it's clamped, it doesn't matter that I'm cutting up here, it works fine. And I can, done. So anyway, this is something wasn't my idea, somebody else came up with it, but seemed to work pretty well. So that was the last thing. Let me check my list and make sure I covered everything I wanted to cover.
Put a little round over on that too with a router. When you're all done, when you get a nice and, I don't know.
What? You mean the bottom of the legs? You could. I just sanded them with a palm sander around the edges. Legs. Yeah, that's all I had. So, this? Well, that actually, I screwed up almost killed myself once trying to cut those things until I figured out that jig. So, okay, any questions on stools? It'd be fun if actually your grandkids and people really like them. So I don't know if I'm going to have to make another 25 or not, but it's people are buying them and they're paying an unbelievable amount of money for them. The store is selling them for $120, and they're selling them. So I'm impressed with that. So, George. Okay, so George saying another way to do it is to mark the center of the legs, which I've already got marked, and put it upside down on your drill press and run a Forstner bit into it to smooth it out. Yeah, the only problem with that is you still have to go to the same depth on each one to make a, yeah, so use your depth stop on your drill press. That would work too, and probably much simpler than this, so that's a good idea. Any other questions? No. Well, you could you know, I thought of that. Not abalone, but I thought. So before you finish this, you could like laser engrave your grandchild's name on it, or a picture, or you could do it's pretty much an open canvas for anything you might want to do. A lot of people are using them for plant stands, so that would make sense. But if you were making it for somebody, you could do that. So, any other questions? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.